If you have ongoing exposure to controlling people, it's a virtual certainty that you're going to experience blurry boundaries, which is why I've created the extensive online course called This Is Me, Establishing Boundaries with the Controllers in Your Life. There's a link below that will give you all of the details, and I hope that you would find it therapeutic. One of the easiest ways to determine if a person has a strong inclination toward narcissism is to watch how they manage themselves when they're given a position of authority. Now, one of the roles that a person can have in life that just has authority built right into it is the role of parenting. Ideally, you would hope that the parent sees themselves as being a person who creates a home atmosphere of safety. It's lots of nurturance and teaching and guidance, but it's done in such a way where it builds up the child's character from the inside out. But sometimes it just doesn't work that way. Keeping in mind that narcissists are so self-impressed and so controlling and entitled that they can bring those kind of ingredients to the authority position of parenting. And the net results that can last for years and years can be very unpleasant. Now, I've put together 12 of the primary indicators that you can watch for that would tell us if a parent is in that narcissistic bent. So let's get straight to it, and I want you to see if any of these sound very familiar to you. Now, number one on my list, and this goes along with this whole notion of authority, number one, conformity and correctness will override the desire to be nurturing. Now, again, you want that parent to have a nurturing style, but the bottom line is the child is thinking, no, I have to get you to do everything according to what I say, and sometimes that need can be so strong that tenderness and gentleness is kind of pushed off to the wayside, and eventually the child realizes, okay, if I'm going to have any kind of well-being here at home, I have to figure out what's on the script, and I have to do what's being told to me in that respect. Now, number two, right along with that, you can see that narcissistic parent rarely actually elicits a child's perspective. It's like, I don't need to hear from you. In other words, no empathy. That's one of the lead ingredients of narcissism. And the child may be feeling certain things, or they may have certain needs that perhaps conflict with what the parent wants. And rather than saying, let's talk about it, it's like, look, I'm just going to push my agenda on you, and if you don't like it, you have to do it anyway. Now, that leads to a close third indicator, and that is that narcissistic parent can often accuse a child without taking the context into account. Many times a child can say or do something that, at least on the surface, may seem a bit unpleasing. But then when you break it down, it's like, oh, there were certain reasons, or there were certain elements or interpretations that child was making. Let's see if we can get that out on the table. The narcissistic parent, it's like, no, I don't want to hear from that child. It takes too much time, and it might mean that I'd have to admit that I was wrong or I had an inappropriate interpretation. We're not going to do that. Now, number four, and this is an interesting one, is what I refer to as passive-aggressive privilege that the narcissistic parent will assume. Now, by that I mean they have double standards. For example, they may say, you can't say ugly things about people, but I can. Or you're supposed to be responsible with family responsibilities and priorities, but I can go out and play and do whatever I want. Or if I have activities that take me away from my parenting responsibilities, and to the extent that it's actually self-indulgent, I'll do it anyway. And so they allow themselves to take privileges that they certainly would not encourage on the inside of a child. And it has its own passive aggressiveness. It's the parent's way of saying, nobody tells me what to do, and if I want to do something that's contrary to family responsibilities, it's just what I do. Now, a fifth indicator is these narcissistic parents will create an atmosphere of defensiveness. Over time, that child begins thinking, I have to be very careful and cautious and calculated about what I say. And as a result, they're very edgy and they're constantly thinking, if I say this, am I going to get in trouble? And so I have to do this instead. Then number 6, we can also say that as part of their narcissism, sometimes parents can teach through shaming questions. Now, one of my pet peeves anyway is people who try to make their point via questions. Now, narcissistic parents might say something like, why are you being so argumentative? Now, they're asking the question, but not really. They're just making a point and they're shaming the child in the process. Or, did you really think that that was a good idea? Those kinds of ways of making a point. The kid, of course, goes slinking away after receiving that. A 7th indicator is that narcissistic parent may be friendly in public and rude at home. The notion is when we're out there in public, we have to look ideal. Now, behind the scenes, we have all sorts of garbage that the public may not know about, but that's the way it works around here. And you're going to be on the receiving end of the rudeness. Now, an 8th indicator is the narcissistic parent can make heavy use of a grading system. And when I say grading system, anything and everything is subject to being put on that scale. For example, if you have certain emotions or achievements or opinions, you're going to be told if it's correct or incorrect, good or bad, right or wrong. And there's a certain aspect of that can be okay. You want to teach those kind of things to a child. But the child is constantly thinking, well, I certainly don't want to be called out for being bad or dumb or inappropriate. So what's the grade going to be today? And I'll have to try to conform to that. Now that plays right into number 9. And that is that narcissistic parent does a lot of telling as opposed to discussing. They'll give a lot of criticism, unsolicited advice. Communication is one way. Now, a 10th indicator of narcissistic parenting is that individual may have a lot of emotional immaturity, whether it's through their dysregulated anger or just a chronic undertow of agitation and irritability. Sometimes that parent may be very anxiety prone. Other times they're emotionally distant and unavailable, but their emotionality tends to be consistently inconsistent. Now, number 11, that narcissistic parent may be one that plays favorites. Many times in these kind of homes, you see that there's one person that's the golden child and another that's the scapegoat, and that parent learns to triangulate the kids, play one off the other. And it's their way of saying anything that I have to do to reward people that go along with me and to punish people that don't, I'm willing to do it. And kids can feel like they're a pawn in that kind of game. And then we'll conclude with number 12, and that is in a narcissistic parent's home, love feels very conditional. It's only when you do things that suit the parent's narrative that you're going to feel like there might be love that comes forward, if it comes forward at all. Now, of course, if you were the kind of person that grew up with this kind of parenting style, there are all sorts of impacts that this can leave on to you, going all the way deep into your adult years. Kids who grow up with this learn to relate with fear. They have difficulty in trusting others. Are you going to come down on me? If I say the wrong thing, will you get mad? Because it's built into their system. Many times these individuals are very calculated and guarded when it comes time to be close. Other times they can have extremes in the way that they approach people. Sometimes they can grab onto other individuals later on thinking, oh boy, this is going to be it. And so they're too quick to commit to other individuals. But nonetheless, that neediness is very much there on the inside because it was not satisfied during those earlier years. Often, if a child has been exposed to this kind of parenting, they've learned to suppress their emotions. And as a result, they have difficulty at times being open and honest about it because they've never really learned how to put it out there on the table and go through it in a very objective kind of way. And at the end of it all, you can say that when children who come up in this kind of system, when they become angry, it can be ugly because they've never really had exposure to ways of managing conflict in a real clean kind of fashion. So if you're the person who's had or been exposed to narcissistic parenting, let's understand that, first of all, you can be in a lifelong learning process. By the way, I tell folks all the time, your best thinking in life doesn't even begin until you hit 40. You have a couple of decades of adulting that's under your belt, and you have the chance to look back and think, okay, what's going on in my life and in my history that has and has not worked? And so if you've had this kind of history, let's understand that learning comes by way of unlearning. And by that, I mean, you want to ask, what was it that happened in those earlier years that simply wasn't right and wasn't appropriate? What issues did I have that needed to be addressed that weren't? What was going on at the foundation of the parent that caused them to be the way that they are? And you want to have a certain insight into them, because as you look back, you realize that narcissistic parent was probably predisposed to who knows what kind of influences from their life, and it was just passed on to you. And then ultimately, you want to be the kind of person that says, I'm going to be firmly grounded in what I believe are healthy values and standards and priorities. In other words, at some point in my adult life, I get to have the permission to be fully me and to define who I'm going to be. If necessary, sometimes you may need to confront that parent later on as you get all this cleared out. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But the bottom line is you can refuse to play the subordinate role. It's like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Narcissistic parents come into their role with brokenness. They have a position of authority, but unfortunately, there's so much on the inside of them that has been off base that they had brought that into that role. But I'm hoping you can decide someone in this family needs to be the one that breaks the cycle, and that's going to be me. And I hope that being able to identify things like this can be something that can be healing for you. It can cause you to have that resolve that says, I am going to be that better alternative. If you've not already hit the subscribe button, I would encourage you to do so, and we'll keep bringing more videos that will challenge your thinking and hopefully have a positive impact on you. Hit the like button as well. So if you haven't hit the subscribe button, go ahead and do that. In addition, many times when you're going through things of this and trying to figure it out, you could use somebody that could help you, a therapist. I'm so pleased that we're sponsored by the people at BetterHelp.com. And if you have that need, we have a link below that will take you to their online therapy service. It's become a very popular and affordable way of approaching therapy. And so if you have that need, please avail yourself to that possibility. In addition, I have my therapeutic courses, and these are like signing up for video classes, and they're very extensive with multiple videos per course and written documents and guided questions. We have Ready, Set, Connect about making healthy connection skills. This is me about establishing good boundaries, free to be, finding yourself despite those controllers in your life. We also have my podcast. For those of you who are in the podcast world, we have my books, and we have our website with many articles on there, plenty of resources for you to avail yourself to. I truly appreciate you allowing me to be on your journey with you. Okay, I know that there are times when people will take that position of authority in parenting and use it in ways that just prop up their unfinished business on the inside. But as you're able to see it, I truly hope that you are going to be the one that says, I want to be different. I want to be a positive presence in the lives of people that come from in my life from here forward, because I want to be a person of steadiness, and ultimately I want to be a person and a giver of peace.